My daughter told her brother, "Mom's losing it. We need to step in before she ruins everything." They thought I couldn't hear them through the kitchen wall. They were wrong about a lot of things. Now they are learning just how wrong. Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this, and also comment where you are watching from. Thanks. I was wiping down the kitchen counter for the third time that morning when I heard Jennifer's voice drift through the thin wall that separated my kitchen from what used to be my home office. She was talking to her brother David, both of them speaking in those hushed tones people use when they think they are being careful. But after 43 years of marriage to a man who thought whispering was the same as being quiet, I would develop excellent hearing for conversations that weren't meant for me. "She is getting worse," Jennifer said, and I could picture her sitting in my old leather desk chair, probably with her feet up on the mahogany desk I would inherited from my mother. Yesterday she asked me 3 times when Carlos was picking up the kids, and last week she put salt in her coffee instead of sugar. I hadn't put salt in my coffee. I would been distracted because David's wife Stephanie had been vacuuming at 7 in the morning right outside my bedroom door. But I would tasted the coffee before I drank it. The salt thing was something Jennifer made up, probably to add weight to whatever point she was building toward. "I know," David replied, his voice carrying that particular blend of concern and exhaustion that adult children perfect when they talk about their aging parents. "Stephanie thinks we should start looking into options, you know. Before she does something dangerous." Options, that word landed in my chest like a cold stone. I would heard that word before, whispered in hospital hallways and senior center waiting rooms. Options meant decisions made without me, about me, for my own good. I set down the dish towel and moved closer to the wall. My bare feet silent on the linoleum. I would installed myself 20 years ago when money was tight and pride was strong. "The house is getting to be too much for her," Jennifer continued. "Look at this place. She cannot keep up with it anymore." I looked around my kitchen with its spotless counters and organized cabinets, herbs growing in perfect rows on the windowsill, floor so clean you could eat off it. Not keeping up. I would been cleaning houses since I was 12. First my mother's when she got sick, then my own for 45 years. And now somehow I was failing at the one thing I would never failed at. "And financially," David added, lowering his voice even further, "we need to make sure everything's protected. You know how seniors can be targeted by scams." Her judgment isn't what it used to be. My judgment. I would manage the books for 3 small businesses in town until I retired 5 years ago. I would balanced my own checkbook to the penny every month since 1981. I would invested my husband's life insurance money so carefully that I would turned it into enough to carry me through retirement without ever being a burden to anyone. But apparently, my judgment wasn't what it used to be. Dr. Patterson said, "There are tests," Jennifer said. "Memory tests, cognitive assessments. If we can establish that she is no longer capable of managing her affairs." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles going white. Dr. Patterson was my doctor, had been for 15 years. The idea that Jennifer had spoken to him about me, about my mental state, without my knowledge or consent, made my stomach turn. "We would have to be careful about how we approach it," David said. "She has always been stubborn. But if we frame it as being concerned about her safety, her well-being, power of attorney first," Jennifer suggested, "for her own protection, then we can look at residential options. There is that nice place on Elm Street. Very clean. Good staff. Residential options." They were talking about putting me in a home. My children, who I would raised in this house, fed at this table, sent to college with money I would saved by cutting coupons and buying day-old bread, were sitting in my office discussing how to take away my home and my freedom. I heard chair legs scraping against the hardwood floor and quickly moved back to the sink, grabbing the dish towel and trying to look busy. A moment later, Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her face wearing that bright, false smile she would perfected somewhere around age 16. "How are you doing, Mom?" she asked. her voice artificially cheerful. "You look tired." I looked tired because I would been up since 5:30 making breakfast for her family and David's family, just like I had every morning since they would moved in 3 months ago. Their temporary arrangement while they got back on their feet had somehow become permanent. With my 4-bedroom house suddenly housing 9 people and me relegated to the role of live-in cook and babysitter. "I am fine," I said, forcing my own smile. "Just getting lunch ready." "You don't have to do that," Jennifer said, but she made no move to stop me. "We can order pizza that I would end up paying for. Like everything else, the groceries, the utilities, the streaming services they would added to my cable bill. Even the gas they put in their cars somehow came out of my checking account, always with promises to pay me back that never materialized." "It is no trouble," I lied. David appeared behind Jennifer, his bulk filling the rest of the doorway. My son had gotten heavy in recent years, not from good living, but from stress eating and unemployment that stretched longer each time. He looked around the kitchen, with the critical eye of someone evaluating a piece of property. "Mom, we have been talking," he said, and I braced myself. "We are worried about you." "Worried," I repeated, wiping my hands on the towel. "What about, you have seemed confused lately," Jennifer said gently. "Forgetful. And this house is getting to be a lot for you to manage." I looked at my kitchen again, trying to see what they saw. The breakfast dishes were washed and put away. The counters were clean, the coffee pot was turned off, the herbs on the windowsill were watered and thriving. I couldn't see anything that suggested I wasn't managing. "I am managing fine," I said. "Are you?" David asked. "Because yesterday Stephanie found the front door unlocked when she came home from her walk." I remembered yesterday. Stephanie had gone for her walk right after breakfast, and I would unlock the front door because I was expecting the grocery delivery. When the delivery came an hour later than scheduled, I would brought in the groceries and started putting them away. Stephanie had come home right as I was finishing, and she would made a big show of checking the lock and asking if I would forgotten to secure it. I hadn't forgotten. I would been waiting for her to come home so I could lock it. But explaining that now would sound like an excuse, and I could see from their faces that they would already decided what the truth was. "I was waiting for you to come back," I said to David, but he would already moved on. "We think it might be time to look at some options," he said. "Places where you would have help, where you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a house this size." "This is my house," I said quietly. "Of course it is," Jennifer said quickly. "No one's trying to take your house away. We are just thinking about what might be easier for you. More comfortable. More comfortable for whom, I wondered. For me, who would raised my children in this house, who would brought my husband home from the hospital to die in the bedroom upstairs, or for them, who would have a whole house to themselves without having to tiptoe around the old lady who owned it. "I don't want to go anywhere," I said. "We know," David said, "and you don't have to make any decisions right now. We are just looking into possibilities for the future." But I could see the future they were planning in their eyes, the residential options and cognitive assessments and power of attorney papers. I could see myself sitting in a sterile room watching strangers live in my house and spend my money while my children told themselves they were acting in my best interests. That night, after I would cook dinner for 9 people and cleaned up the dishes while Jennifer and Stephanie sat in my living room watching my television, I went to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed I would shared with my husband for 43 years, and tried to understand how I would become a problem that needed solving. 3 months ago, when David called asking if he and his family could stay with me for just a few weeks while they found a new place after his latest job loss, I would said yes without hesitation. When Jennifer called 2 weeks later with a similar request after Carlos had been laid off, I would made room for them too. I would rearranged my life, given up my privacy, shared my space and my resources, because that is what mothers do. But somewhere in those 3 months, I would stop being their mother and become their burden. I would stop being the woman who would worked 2 jobs to pay for their college educations and become the confused old lady who forgot to lock doors and put salt in her coffee. I pulled out the small metal box I kept in my nightstand drawer, the one that held my important papers, my birth certificate, my marriage license, my husband's death certificate, and underneath those, the documents that mattered most: my will, my investment statements, and the deed to my house. Margaret Rose Delacroix, sole owner, not co-owner, not with children listed as beneficiaries. Sole owner. I would bought this house with my husband in 1979, and when he died, it had passed to me completely. No liens, no mortgages, no legal claims from anyone else. I spread the investment statements across my bedspread and added up the numbers in my head. My husband's life insurance policy had been generous, and I would invested it carefully. Between that and my own retirement savings, I had more money than my children realized, more than enough to maintain my independence for years to come. But they didn't see an independent woman with financial security. They saw an aging mother with a house too big for her and money that could be better managed by people with their best interests at heart. I put the papers back in the box and locked it carefully. Tomorrow, I decided, I would make some phone calls. It was time to remind myself exactly what my options were before someone else decided what they should be. The next morning started the same way they all did. I was awake before dawn, making coffee and planning breakfast for 9 people. Jennifer came down first, as she always did, her hair perfect. Despite having just gotten out of bed, her clothes carefully chosen to look casual, while still projecting competence. "Morning, Mom," she said, kissing my cheek in that perfunctory way that had replaced real affection somewhere along the line. "Sleep well?" "Fine," I said, not mentioning that I would been awake until nearly 2 in the morning, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. "David and I were thinking we should make an appointment with Dr. Patterson," she said, moving to the coffee pot and pouring herself a cup. "Just for a checkup, make sure everything's okay. I had my physical 6 months ago," I reminded her. "Everything was fine, I know, but these things can change quickly at your age." She said it so casually, as if my age was a disease that could progress overnight. And Dr. Patterson mentioned that there are some new tests available now. Cognitive screenings. They are very simple, nothing to worry about. I stopped stirring the pancake batter and looked at her. "When did Dr. Patterson mention that?" "Oh, I ran into him at the grocery store last week," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We were just chatting about how you were doing, chatting about how I was doing with my doctor." Without my permission or knowledge, I wondered what else they would discuss, what other plans had been made during casual grocery store conversations. "I don't need cognitive screening," I said. "Of course not," Jennifer said quickly. "It is just standard now for people over 65. Preventive care, like mammograms or colonoscopies. But mammograms and colonoscopies were medical procedures designed to detect illness. Cognitive screening in my case was the first step in proving I was incompetent to manage my own affairs. I wasn't naive enough to think otherwise. By 8 of the clock, the kitchen was full of family. David and Stephanie with their 2 teenagers, Jennifer and Carlos with their 3 younger children. All of them sitting around my breakfast table, eating food I would prepared, while they discussed their plans for the day. Plans that involved my car, my house, my resources, but not me. "Mom, I need to borrow the car today," David announced. Not asked, Stephanie has a job interview in Hartford. My car, which I would bought and paid for and maintained, had somehow become the family vehicle. It spent more time in driveways other than mine than it did at home. "I was thinking of going to the library," I said. "Cannot you do that tomorrow?" Stephanie asked. "This interview is really important." Everything was always really important when it came to their needs. My needs, on the other hand, were flexible, postponable, unimportant. "Of course," I said, because refusing would lead to a conversation about how I didn't really need to go anywhere, how I should be careful about driving too much at my age, how maybe it was time to think about giving up the car keys altogether. After breakfast, as I cleaned up the dishes, and they all scattered to their various activities using my resources, I called my friend Helen. Helen was 82 and sharp as a tack, and she would been through something similar with her own family 5 years earlier. "They want you declared incompetent," she said without hesitation. After I would explain the situation, "It is not about your safety or your well-being. It is about control." "But I am not incompetent," I said. "Of course you are not. But competency isn't about what you can do. It is about what a judge decides you can do based on what your family tells them you cannot do. And if you don't fight back, you will lose everything." "How do I fight back?" "First, you document everything. Every conversation. Every decision they make without consulting you. Every time they use your resources without permission. Then you make sure your own affairs are in order." "Who is your lawyer?" I realized I didn't have a lawyer. Not really. The man who would handle my husband's estate had retired years ago, and I would never bothered to find a replacement. I would thought I wouldn't need one. "I will give you a name," Helen said. "Someone who specializes in elder law. Call her today." "What if they are right?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in the back of my mind. "What if I am losing my memory? My judgment?" "Margaret," Helen said firmly, "you called me at exactly 9:30, just like you always do. You remembered my phone number without looking it up. You told me about every conversation from yesterday with perfect recall. Your mind is fine. Don't let them convince you otherwise." That afternoon, while my house was full of people living their lives in my space, I called the lawyer Helen recommended. Janet Morrison, elder law specialist. Her receptionist was able to fit me in for an appointment the following week. "What type of situation are we dealing with?" the receptionist asked. "Family members trying to have me declared incompetent," I said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way that thinking it hadn't. "I see, and do you have any legal documents currently in place? Power of attorney, healthcare directives?" "No," I said. "Should I?" "We will discuss that when you come in." "But Mrs. Delacroix, if you are concerned about family members overriding your wishes, you will want to get proper documentation in place as soon as possible." After I hung up, I sat in my bedroom with the door closed and thought about the life I would build. This house, which I would painted and repaired and improved over the years. The garden outside my window, where I still grew tomatoes and herbs and flowers. The savings account I would build through careful planning and sacrifice. The independence I would fought for after my husband died, when well-meaning friends and family members had suggested I might be better off in a retirement community. I would been managing just fine before my children moved in. I would been cooking and cleaning and driving and handling my own finances without any problems. The confusion and forgetfulness they were so concerned about had only started after my peaceful, organized life had been turned upside down by 8 additional people who treated my home like a hotel and me like the staff. Maybe it was time to restore the peace and order they would disrupted. Maybe it was time to remind them who owned this house and who was living here as a guest. That evening, while Jennifer and Stephanie planned a grocery shopping trip that would undoubtedly involve my credit card, I excused myself and went to my room. I pulled out my checkbook and recent bank statements and started making a list. Groceries for 9 people, $2,400 per month. Utilities for a house with 8 extra occupants, $380 per month. Gas for the car they borrowed daily, $200 per month. Streaming services they would added to my cable, $89 per month. Cell phone plan upgrades for family members, $140 per month. In 3 months, I would spend over $9,600 supporting adult children and their families who were supposedly staying with me temporarily while they got back on their feet. But instead of using the time to find jobs and save money, they would been using my resources as a cushion, while they planned to take away my independence. I calculated what I would been spending on myself before they moved in. Groceries for 1 person, $250 per month. Utilities for 1 person, in a 4-bedroom house, $180 per month. My basic cable package, $65 per month. Gas for occasional trips to the library and grocery store, $40 per month. I would been spending $535 per month on myself. Now I was spending over $3,200 per month, and somehow I was the one becoming a financial burden. The next day, I told Jennifer I was going to the library and asked if I could borrow my own car. She frowned and said she would hope to take the children to the park, but I reminded her that she would been planning to walk there for exercise anyway. I didn't wait for her to come up with another objection. At the library, I used one of their computers to research cognitive competency assessments and elder law. What I learned made my blood run cold. Once a family initiated competency proceedings, the burden of proof shifted to the elderly person to prove they were capable of managing their affairs. The process could take months, during which family members could be granted temporary guardianship and control over assets. Even if I ultimately proved my competency, I could lose months of independence and thousands of dollars in legal fees, and the stress of fighting the proceedings could actually cause the cognitive decline they were claiming to be concerned about. But there was another option. If I acted quickly to put my own legal protections in place, if I documented my current competency with medical and psychological evaluations, if I took control of the narrative before they did, I could protect myself. I printed out everything I could find about elder rights and competency proceedings. Then I drove to Dr. Patterson's office and asked for an emergency appointment. I understand my daughter spoke with you about my mental state, I said to Dr. Patterson when he came into the examination room. He looked uncomfortable. She expressed some concerns about memory issues. As your physician, I am always happy to address family worries about cognitive changes. What exactly did she tell you? That you have been having some confusion. Forgetting conversations, making mistakes like putting salt in your coffee. She was wondering about cognitive screening. Dr. Patterson, I have never put salt in my coffee. I haven't forgotten any conversations. I haven't shown any signs of confusion or memory loss. My daughter is building a case to have me declared incompetent, so she can gain control of my finances and property. Dr. Patterson's expression shifted from professional concern to something more serious. Mrs. Delacroix, those are very serious allegations. They are very serious intentions, I replied. I need you to document my current mental state. I need cognitive testing, but I want it done properly, by qualified professionals, with results that cannot be manipulated or misinterpreted. Of course, I can refer you to a neuropsychologist for comprehensive testing. And Mrs. Delacroix, I want you to know that I would never participate in any effort to have you declared incompetent without proper medical justification. But you would have if Jennifer had convinced you I was actually declining? He was quiet for a moment. If a family member brought credible concerns about cognitive decline, yes, I would recommend appropriate evaluation and intervention, which meant that if Jennifer had been more careful about her lies, more convincing in her performance of concerned daughter, Dr. Patterson might have unwittingly helped her build a case against me. I want everything documented, I said. My current cognitive state, my ability to manage my affairs, my physical health. I want it all on record that as of today, I am fully competent and capable. I will make sure of it, he promised. When I got home, the house was in chaos. Stephanie was on the phone with someone, her voice carrying that edge it got when she was demanding something. David was in the kitchen, eating leftover soup directly from the pot without heating it up. Jennifer was at my computer in the office, doing something that required a lot of typing and muttering. How was the library? Jennifer asked. When she saw me, educational, I said. That night, I made dinner as usual, but instead of staying to clean up, I announced that I was tired and going to bed early. I locked my bedroom door and spread all the information I would gathered across my bed. Articles about elder abuse, legal forms for advance directives, contact information for elder law attorneys. I was not going to let my children steal my life from me. I was not going to become one of those elderly people who disappears into the system while their families divide up their assets. I was going to fight back. But first, I was going to let them dig their hole a little deeper. Over the next week, I started paying attention to things I would been too polite to notice before. Jennifer going through my mail when she thought I wasn't looking. David asking casual questions about my investment accounts. Stephanie mentioning how much easier it would be for me if I didn't have to worry about managing money anymore. They were building their case, documenting my supposed decline, preparing for the day when they would sadly, reluctantly conclude that I could no longer care for myself. But I was building my own case too. I started keeping a detailed journal of every conversation, every incident, every use of my resources without permission. I documented the times they spoke about me as if I wasn't there, the decisions they made without consulting me, the way they would gradually take over my house and my life. On Thursday morning, Jennifer announced that she would make an appointment for me with Dr. Patterson for cognitive screening. I didn't ask for an appointment, I said. I know, but Dr. Patterson thinks it is a good idea, just to establish a baseline for your medical records. I will handle my own medical appointments, I said. Mom, you don't need to be defensive about this. It is just standard care for someone your age. But it wasn't standard care. It was the first official step in proving I was incompetent, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them. Cancel the appointment, I said. I really think you should keep it, Jennifer pressed. Dr. Patterson was very concerned when I told him about some of the things that have been happening. What things? The confusion, the forgetfulness. Yesterday you asked me twice what time Carlos was coming home. I had asked twice, but not because I would forgotten. I would asked because the first time she would said 6 of the clock, and then I would overheard her tell Carlos that I was expecting him at 6:30. I would been trying to figure out which time was correct, not because I was confused, but because she would given me conflicting information. I remember the conversation perfectly, I said. You told me 6 of the clock, then told Carlos 6:30. I was trying to clarify which time was accurate. Jennifer looked genuinely surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to have such a clear recollection of something she would apparently reframed as evidence of my decline. I don't remember saying different times, she said. But you did. Carlos can confirm it if you ask him. Okay, but even so, these little mix-ups are happening more often, and Dr. Patterson thinks. Dr. Patterson thinks what I tell him to think. I interrupted. I have already spoken with him about this situation. What situation? The situation where my adult children are trying to have me declared incompetent so they can take control of my house and my finances. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Jennifer's face went through several expressions: surprise, denial, hurt, and finally something that looked like respect. Mom, that is not what we are trying to do, isn't it? We are worried about you. This house is getting to be too much. Your memory, my memory is fine. My house is exactly the right size for me. What is too much is supporting 8 additional people who contribute nothing while they plan to take away my independence. That is not fair. What is not fair is using my resources while plotting to take away my right to control them. Jennifer sat down at the kitchen table, her composure finally cracking. We are not plotting anything. We love you. We want what is best for you. What is best for me is living in my own house, managing my own affairs, and being treated like a competent adult instead of a problem to be solved. But if something happened to you, if you fell or got sick or made a financial mistake, then I would deal with it. The same way I have been dealing with everything else for the past 5 years since your father died. I don't need guardians. I need my family to respect my independence. That night, David came to talk to me. He knocked on my bedroom door like a child asking permission to enter. And when I opened it, he looked smaller somehow, less sure of himself. Mom, Jennifer said you were upset about the doctor's appointment. I am upset about the presumption that I need cognitive screening based on lies your sister told about my behavior. They are not lies, he said, But he didn't sound convinced. You have seemed confused lately. I have seemed overwhelmed because my quiet, organized life has been turned upside down by 8 people who moved into my house and started treating me like hired help. We don't treat you like hired help, don't you? When is the last time someone else cooked dinner in my kitchen? When is the last time someone else paid for groceries or utilities? When is the last time anyone asked my permission before using my car or my money or my space? He was quiet for a long moment. We have been going through a hard time financially, I know, and I have been helping. But there is a difference between helping family through a difficult period and being taken advantage of while they plan to take away your independence. We are not trying to take away your independence. Then what would you call residential options and power of attorney and cognitive assessments? He looked genuinely surprised. How did you know about that? Because you discussed it in my office, thinking I couldn't hear you through the wall. His face flushed red. We were worried. You were planning. There is a difference. What do you want us to do? It was the first time in months that anyone had asked me what I wanted. I want you to remember that this is my house, my money, and my life. I want you to contribute to the household expenses instead of treating me like a free resource. And I want you to abandon any plans to have me declared incompetent. And if we do that, then you can continue living here while you get back on your feet. But if you don't, you will need to find somewhere else to live. You would kick us out? I would reclaim my house from people who were using it against me. The next morning, I called Janet Morrison, the elder law attorney Helen had recommended. Her office was downtown, in one of those converted Victorian houses that radiated competence and discretion. Janet herself was about my age, with gray hair and sharp eyes, and the kind of presence that suggested she didn't suffer. Fools gladly. I liked her immediately. Tell me what is happening, she said, and I told her everything. The conversations I would overheard, the financial drain, the plans for cognitive assessment, and residential options. How much are we talking about in terms of assets? She asked. I showed her my financial statements. The house, valued at $340,000, and owned free and clear. Investment accounts totaling $420,000. Savings accounts with another $75,000. Not wealthy but comfortable, enough to maintain my independence for the rest of my life if managed properly. More than enough to make guardianship attractive to family members. Janet observed, and you have been supporting them financially for 3 months. They moved in temporarily while they got back on their feet. Mrs. Delacroix. In my experience, temporary arrangements like this rarely remain temporary unless the elderly person takes active steps to enforce boundaries. Your family has become comfortable with the current arrangement, where they have all the benefits of your resources without any of the responsibilities of independence. What are my options? Several. First, we can establish comprehensive advance directives that specifically name who you do and do not want making decisions on your behalf if you ever become incapacitated. Second, we can set up financial safeguards that would make it difficult for anyone to access your assets without your explicit consent. Third, we can document your current competency so thoroughly that any future claims to the contrary would be obviously baseless. And if they proceed with competency proceedings anyway, then we fight them, and we win. But Mrs. Delacroix, prevention is always better than cure. If you act now to protect yourself, they will find it much more difficult to move against you later. What about the immediate situation? They are living in my house, using my resources, planning to take away my independence. That is a separate issue, but related. You have every right to set terms for people living in your home. You can require them to contribute financially, to respect your autonomy, to abandon any plans for guardianship. If they refuse, you can ask them to leave. Even though they are my children, especially because they are your children. Mrs. Delacroix, being someone's parent doesn't mean sacrificing your own rights and autonomy. You have raised your children and launched them into independent lives. You don't owe them continued financial support, especially not when they are using that support to undermine your independence. I hired Janet Morrison that day. By the end of the week, I had comprehensive advance directives naming my friend Helen as my healthcare proxy and establishing that under no circumstances did I want David or Jennifer making medical or financial decisions on my behalf. I had a revocable trust set up that would protect my assets while ensuring I maintained complete control during my lifetime. And I had documentation from 3 different medical professionals stating that I was mentally competent and capable of managing my own affairs. Then I went home and called a family meeting. They gathered in my living room with the reluctant air of teenagers being called to account by the principal. David and Stephanie sat on the couch, Jennifer and Carlos in the armchairs. The older grandchildren lined up on the floor, looking uncomfortable. I have spent the last week consulting with legal and medical professionals about my situation, I began. I now have comprehensive documentation of my mental competency and legal protections in place to ensure that no one can override my autonomy or access my assets without my consent. Jennifer started to speak, but I held up my hand. I have also calculated what it has cost me to support this household for the past 3 months. $9,600 in direct expenses, not counting wear and tear on my house and car or the opportunity cost of investments I couldn't make, because the money was going to groceries and utilities. Mom, David began, but I wasn't finished. I overheard your conversation about having me declared incompetent and placed in residential care so you could gain control of my house and finances. I know about the appointment Jennifer made with Dr. Patterson without my consent. I know about the discussions of power of attorney and cognitive assessments. The room was completely silent now, even the children sensing the gravity of the moment. You have a choice, I continued. You can abandon these plans completely, begin contributing to household expenses, and respect my independence and autonomy. Or you can find somewhere else to live. This is our home too, Stephanie said, her voice shaky. No, it isn't. This is my home. You are guests who have been taking advantage of my hospitality while planning to betray my trust. We were worried about you, Jennifer insisted. You were worried about yourselves, about what would happen to your comfortable living situation if I remained independent, about whether you would inherit as much if I lived long enough to spend my own money on my own care. That is not true, David said, but he couldn't meet my eyes, isn't it? Then prove it. Get jobs. Pay rent. Contribute to utilities and groceries. Treat me with the respect you would show any other adult who was helping you through a difficult time. And if we cannot, Carlos asked quietly, then you will need to find alternative arrangements, because I will not continue to support people who are actively working against my interests. Where would we go? Stephanie asked. That is not my problem to solve. You are all adults with children. Figure it out the same way millions of other people. Figure it out every day. The next week was tense, but instructive. Jennifer and Carlos both started job hunting with a seriousness they hadn't shown in months. David began talking about unemployment benefits and retraining programs instead of complaining about unfair employers. Stephanie started contributing to groceries and offered to take over some of the household cleaning. But I could see the resentment in their eyes, the sense that I was being unreasonable, that I was choosing money over family. They didn't understand that I was choosing self-preservation over their convenience, that I was refusing to be sacrificed for their comfort. 3 weeks later, David found a job, part-time. But it was a start. Jennifer got hired as a bookkeeper for a small business. They began paying me modest rent and contributing to household expenses. The conversations about cognitive assessments and residential options stopped entirely. But the damage to our relationships was real and lasting. They spoke to me with careful politeness instead of natural affection. They included me in family activities with the dutiful air of people fulfilling an obligation. They loved me, but they also resented me for refusing to be the convenient, manageable elderly mother they would wanted me to become. By Christmas, they would saved enough money to move into a rental house across town. The day they moved out, I helped carry boxes to their cars and hugged the grandchildren goodbye. There were promises to visit regularly, plans for Sunday dinners, assurances that this was just a new chapter. Not an ending, but I knew better. I would protected my independence, my assets, and my autonomy. But I would lost something too. The easy, unguarded relationship I would once had with my children was gone, replaced by something more careful, more conditional. That evening, I sat in my quiet house and tried to decide if the trade-off had been worth it. My home was mine again. My finances were secure. My future was in my own hands. But the family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me with their images of simpler times, when love didn't come with price tags and conditions. Helen called that night, as if she could sense my mood across town. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Relieved," I said. "And sad. That is normal. Protecting yourself from family exploitation always comes with a cost. But Margaret, you did the right thing. You would have lost everything if you hadn't fought back." "I know, but I wish it hadn't been necessary." "I know you do, but they made it necessary when they decided to see you as a resource instead of a person." 6 months later, I am still living alone in my 4-bedroom house. I have turned the office back into a proper office, with my desk and my files and my computer. I have replanted the garden with vegetables I actually want to grow, instead of trying to feed a crowd. I have resumed my volunteer work at the Literacy Center and joined a book club at the library. David calls every few weeks to check in, but our conversations are surface level and brief. Jennifer texts occasionally, usually when she needs something. The grandchildren visit sometimes, but always with their parents hovering, monitoring what I say and do as if they are still looking for signs of incompetence. I know they think I am a difficult, stubborn old woman who chose money over family. They don't understand that I chose autonomy over convenience, that I refuse to be erased for their comfort. They don't see that every elderly person who gets bulldozed by well-meaning family members starts out exactly where I was, competent, independent, and unsuspecting. But I am not bitter. I am free. I wake up in my own house, make decisions about my own life, and spend my own money on my own priorities. I have friends who respect my independence, and a lawyer who ensures my autonomy is legally protected. I have a future that belongs to me, instead of to people who are planning to manage it for my own good. Sometimes at night, when the house is quiet, and the grandchildren's photos smile at me from the bookshelf, I wonder if I could have handled things differently. If I could have maintained my independence without losing my family's easy affection. But then I remember the conversation I overheard through the kitchen wall, the plans they made without including me, the cognitive assessments they scheduled without my consent. I remember how close I came to losing everything I would worked for, everything I would built, everything that made me who I am, and I know I made the right choice. Because loving your family doesn't mean letting them destroy you, and being someone's mother doesn't mean sacrificing your own rights to their convenience. I am 73 years old. I own my house free and clear. I have enough money to last the rest of my life, and I make my own decisions about my own future. That is not stubbornness or selfishness. That is success. Let anyone who thinks otherwise try to prove otherwise.